Hi there, today's reading was from Luke 7 verses 11 to 17. Let me just set the scene a little bit for you. Obviously it was tragic that the widow's son had died, her one and only son. But what we may not realise in today's culture is the significance of that it would have plunged her into poverty. There was no welfare state there. Yes, she may have got a few food handouts from her local synagogue or the temple, but really she would have been plunged into poverty. So not only was she grieving, but her whole life had changed as well. And in verse 13, Jesus comes into the scene. He comes in full of compassion for the woman, full of love, as he says, "Don't cry." Now, if somebody had said that to me at that point, I probably would have gone off on one, but she doesn't, which is interesting. We'll come back to that in a minute, why that might be. But Jesus quite clearly doesn't have any fear of death or dead bodies. You got to understand, in that culture, if you touched a dead body, it would mean that you were ceremonially unclean. But Jesus goes straight up to those carrying it was being like an open coffin, and touches it, not worried about that it would make him unclean. Well, I think that's because he knew that he would be resurrected. Not that he would come back to life again, but he would go through death and out the other side, that he would beat death for once and for all, that it wouldn't hold the power that it used to have. So Jesus didn't have that fear of death. And then what did he say to that young man? Well, it was very almost softly spoken and quiet, wasn't it? When he said, "Get up." And it just took a moment and a few words, and the young man came back to life. It was amazing. I wonder, the Bible talks about that the young man was talking as he was resurrected to life. I wonder what he was saying. It would have been great to know those words, but I wonder whether it was something about recognition of God and newness of life going on there. A bit like when people are born again, and there's just an overflowingness about their gratitude to God. I wonder whether that was what was happening there. Well, in verse 16 and 17, we see the crowd's reaction, and it's really interesting that they were hugely in awe of what had happened. And it was like the spiritual soil had already been dug there. So the kingdom seeds that Jesus was planting there, bringing this young man back to life, immediately kind of almost sprung into life. Well, the reason for that was 800 years ago, before this had happened, Elisha had actually raised a child from the dead. And he hadn't done it as quickly or as quietly as Jesus, because obviously he wasn't God. It took him 3 attempts. But that must have been in their folklore and in their history, that actually the man of God, the prophet of God, had brought this child back to life. And here they were again 800 years later, and Jesus was there bringing this boy back to life. First time in a very different way. I wonder whether there are things in our lives, in our communities, that we have seen before, that we want to see God bring back to life, that we want to see God renew in our day and in our time. So I'd encourage you just to take a few moments as we listen to and worship with our next worship song, and just ask the Lord to place on your heart the things that he wants you to pray for, that he would renew in this day and in this time, things of old that maybe he's done in your life, in your family's life, or in your community. God bless.